Hi, this is Madeline Anderson-Balmer with It's All Creative. In today's episode, I think back over the creativity that I exhibited as a child, um, usually to get out of doing something, to be honest. And I remembered this when I was talking about a book that I had been given at a conference few years back. The book is called Because I Said I Would by Alex Sheen. It's a great book. It's actually a project of his. He started a nonprofit and has a lot of stories in this book about just putting a statement out into the universe and making sure that it's done because you said you would do it. You made a promise to yourself, you made a promise to someone else, but voicing those goals. But in this book, right at the very beginning, he talks about a memory he has of being 6 years old, and I'm going to read it to you. Early one morning in the 90s, my dad was sitting quietly at the kitchen table, slowly drinking his coffee and smoking his morning cigarette. At about 6 years old, I was almost comically the opposite. I was running around the house in a way that was annoying to anyone old enough to understand the word mortgage. Suddenly, my dad yelled at me in a stern voice, "Alex, get over here." I could tell he was using his angry voice that only a genuine dad can possess. Not knowing what I had done, I timidly walked over to the kitchen table and stared up at him. "Yes, Dad?" I asked. "Alex," he said, "your room is too messy. I buy you all these toys and games and you leave them all over the floor. You need to go up to your room and clean it right now. But here's the deal. You clean your room and I will give you 50 cents, okay?" I looked at my father. I didn't say anything. I turned around and scrambled up the stairs. I ran down the hallway and into my bedroom, which was right above the kitchen where my father was sitting. Through the ceiling, he could hear my little feet moving across the floor, pushing things around my room. Then, in a unit of time that was obviously not long enough to have really done any cleaning, I ran back down the stairs to where my dad was sitting. I looked him in the eye, threw 2 quarters on the kitchen table, and said, "You do it." Now, I was that kind of kid. My mother asked us to help around the house. She was not a person who did a lot of housework to begin with, but she definitely didn't like having to do dishes all the time and sweep, vacuuming, ironing. Those were things that she would ask us to do as a kid. I personally didn't like doing dishes. I'm so grateful for having a working dishwasher in my house now. But I can remember a time when my mother was going out to do a makeup show. She used to sell makeup door to door. With a company called Fashion 220. And she had asked me as the oldest child to do the dishes. And, kicking and screaming, I didn't really want to do dishes. I don't know how old I was, probably 7 or 8 years old. And she said, "When I come home, I want to see all those dishes washed." And it was probably more than one day's worth of dishes, considering we had 2 sinks and my mother didn't like doing dishes either. So I got an idea in my head. And after my mother left, I went into the kitchen. I got the little stool that I stood on to reach the sink and get the faucet turned on and soap up the water. And I did exactly what she asked for. I washed the dishes. I did not wash any of the silverware. I didn't wash glasses or cups. I didn't wash pots or pans, just the dishes. And I put them in the drain. When I finished, I turned off the water, cleaned out the sink, wiped all the dishes, and put them away. But all the other pieces were still sitting there in the sink. And when she came in, she looked at the sink and she was angry. And she said to me, "I thought I told you to do the dishes." And I opened the cupboard door and said, "I did do the dishes. You didn't say to do anything else." And she laughed, thankfully. But that was the last time that I got away with that joke. But it just makes me think about the creativity of kids. Kids are smart and kids are creative. And they will use their creativity to their own benefit, to escape getting in trouble, to escape a bully, to also pass time. And I know these days, a lot of kids, their days are scheduled. Every minute of their day is scheduled. And so when they do get a break, they end up sitting in front of a screen playing games or watching TV. I do the same thing. I'm playing all kinds of games on my phone and I watch TV. And I try to get myself to limit that. I have a little reminder on my phone that compares my time on the screen week over week. And sometimes the average time on my phone shocks me. Average time per day can be 4 or 5 hours a day. However, it used to be a whole lot more when I was working because I was on Facebook for work. And now I'm on Facebook and a few other sites a lot for doing my podcast and for doing research and setting things up. So it's not that I'm spending all my time playing Candy Crush, which I don't play anymore, but the whole idea of creativity in childhood, there's a lot of kids, and I remember my godson saying one time, I have nothing to do. And it was because he's used to running around all the time and doing things that are scheduled, things that are structured, going someplace, going to the mall, which used to be a big thing back in the 70s and 80s. It isn't anymore. Or taking a class or going to an athletic event or being part of a team and going to soccer games or, doing swimming classes or dance classes or whatever. And everything is very structured. But if we can get our kids, and I don't have children, but I know as a child, this was something that my mother provided to us and my father, was set times in a day. Hey, this is what you have time to do what you want. Here's the materials I'm going to provide. You provide the rest. And we did all kinds of things. We were very fortunate. My grandmother was a printer, and there was a lot of excess paper in her business. Paper with glue on the back of it. Swirly painted paper that was used for the inside of books, the inside covers. There was sample wallpaper books that we used to get. I think my grandfather had those. There's just a ton of different kinds of paper. And so we would just do paper crafts. We would have a huge box of paper, all different colors, metallic, foil, like I said, swirled marble paper. And we would cut it. One day we sat there and made makeup out of it with like little circles to stick to our cheeks and eyelashes we could stick to our eyelids. And I'm sure that glue is not safe for kids, but we didn't seem to get sick from it or anything. And we used that. Other times we would go outside and spend a ton of time just poking around in an old dump that used to be behind a 2-seater outhouse that was in the yard behind my house. The outhouse was used for a long time to keep ducks and chickens in. And then eventually it got torn down. And behind it was a pile of junk that had been thrown back there from well before my time, when my father's family used to have the property as a summer home and then rent out some of the buildings on the property to families. And people would just throw their stuff there. We found a lot of mostly Lydia Pinkham bottles and old wine bottles. One of my friend's fathers used to come over and dig and found a ton of antique bottles there, hand-blown. And he taught us all about pontals and how to check for the age of the bottle and showed us the bubbles that you see in the blown glass. And it was quite an education. But we also used to do something that a friend of mine, Robin Van Vliet, she would come over and we would make stew. Basically, we'd get a big pot and any bottle we found that still had ingredients inside of it, we'd pour it in. Now, those ingredients could have been medicine. It could have been canned goods. I think I remember peaches and pears that were definitely decades old that had been thrown in that dump, and we kind of just pried it all out of the bottles and threw it in there and mixed it with water and dirt and pretended we were making some kind of magic concoction. But the point, more than the fact that we were playing with dangerous things and no one was paying attention to what we were doing with them, but back then people didn't really worry as long as they could see the kids in the yard. It wasn't like you were going to get into any major trouble. But we made up our own games. We definitely played games we learned at school. We played tag and we played Mother May I and Red Light and all those games that maybe kids don't play these days, but we certainly played. And, we also went outside and drew and wrote stories and poems. And we had a lot of land and we didn't live near other houses. So, and for a while, there were no other houses near us, really. So we really just kind of wandered through the woods and the apple orchard and things like that when we were little. But it opened up the action of thinking about creativity. Because your brain is a muscle, creativity is a muscle that needs to be exercised. And if kids aren't allowed to think on their own and come up with ideas and solutions and ways getting out of doing the dishes, that muscle's not going to get exercised and it's not going to be there. Some kids are super creative right from the beginning. That always fascinates me. I know in my family, most of us were super creative in different ways right away. And we're involved in writing and drawing and things. My father used to do a game called Squiggles every Sunday with us. He would draw a squiggle on a piece of paper for each of us, and then we'd have to turn that squiggle into something. And then he would give us check marks depending on how good he thought we had done as far as creating something out of that squiggle. And we all played. It was at the kitchen table, and he would make one squiggle on a piece of paper and hand it to each one of us, and we would each do our own drawings. And not like Pictionary, because he didn't tell us what to do, but really being creative when you're little, you don't have any boundaries already drawn, or you shouldn't when you're that little, because the world is out there and you're exploring and learning all kinds of new things, and being able to put ideas together on your own and come up with things. Maybe what you come up with isn't the greatest, or you're impacted by something a kid at school says. Or I can remember one night and we were telling my mother that all the kids at school were wearing, I don't know if it was jeans, or in the day we called them dungarees, but all the kids were doing something. And she said to us, well, if all the kids jumped off a bridge, would you? And my reply was, if all the kids are jumping off a bridge, maybe we should. So I think when you have little kids, give them a chance to think. Give them a chance to think through things, and listen to them. Listen to their ideas, because in some cases, their ideas can reveal their inner thoughts and concerns and worries. And in some cases, it can reveal that they have a passion about something, that they're curious about something, or that they are learning something new, and maybe you can support it. Because I think that supporting creativity with young children helps to bring about creative adults. And creative adults are people who are problem solvers, people who can find their way around a difficult situation, people who can support others when they need to be supported, and people who don't always need to listen to someone else to do their thing. I think it's really important to understand that creative people have learned to use parts of their brain that other people who aren't creative haven't explored yet. That doesn't mean people can't be creative. I think everybody is creative. It just depends on how early in life or how actively you currently exercise that muscle, because it is there for all of us to use. So that's my message for today. If you're interested in the book because I said I would, again, I said it's by Alex Sheen. And I believe he has a website that's actually under the same name. And I will link to it in the notes on this episode. And I hope that you subscribe to the episode. I hope when you listen to my Monday meanderings, which is what they're turning out to be, that it gives you something to think about, some incentive or motivation to try something new in your life, and that it brings more creativity into your everyday. And I hope that you subscribe. Thanks for listening.